Welcome to the Ask Brien podcast radio show, where you'll hear from some of the most successful founders and CEOs of businesses and startups, sharing their best advice for success and even some stories on how their mistakes actually make them even more successful. Now, here are your hosts, Brien and Traci.
Welcome. Wow, did you turn the volume up? I heard that was loud for me.
You went right up close.
Oh, please. Excuses. And that's not why Ask Brien has an E in it.
That starts with an E, though.
Excuses.
That starts with an E.
All right. Well, you're listening to the Ask Brien radio show, and some of you have never listened to it, so I have to go over this every week. If everyone would start listening to it in the entire world, I wouldn't even have to go over this explanation of Ask Brien. But since there's always new people coming in, we have to go over what the E's are. And first thing is the engineer that begins with an E needs to figure out how to deal with the microphone because it's coming in and out. Like, I don't know what's going on here. So, Mr. Engineer, yeah?
I would make sure that, make sure nothing's on top of it, probably.
And is anything on top of it? No.
Nope, there was. There was.
Excuses.
Yay,
E and E.
This is true.
So, for those of you who have not listened to Ask Brien, we are a radio show each week. We have a business person on the show each week, and we either like to teach a business lesson or go over some business background about a CEO or startup, how they made it to where they are today. And so, this week is like no other week. And we want to also tell people why Ask Brien is spelled ASKBRIEN, because when I went to school, everybody's name was Brien with an A-N or B-R-Y-A-N, but nobody was spelled E-N. By the way, you're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. All right, so Mr. Engineer, forgetting about the E from engineer, think about the E from excuses when you can't figure out the
That's
answer.
a new one, though.
You know what? This is a learning show, and we're trying to teach people things. And so, like, for instance, if you could figure out how to work the microphone, that would be a learning experience for you. That's also an E. So we've got experience, engineer, and excuses, and laughing.
That starts with an L. That starts with an L, sir. And
Well,
that starts with
we're in educational, so it's E-laughing.
E-laughing. Oh, my goodness.
So please tell these people, because our guest is waiting, and he hasn't listened to the show before, and is like going, "What's going on here? What's happening?" I'm supposed to be on a radio show. I'm supposed to be talking about my company, and these guys are going over what excuses they have. So why do we have the E in Ask Brien?
Well, there's a number of words that have to
Give me an excellent answer.
I will give you an excellent answer. Well, there's a lot of E's that have to do with Ask Brien. It's kind of like a thematic thing we got going on for just kind of like what shows, like what the Ask Brien show is about. Yes, you took away the engineer, which, that's you can't run the show without the engineer. That would be me.
Although we do have AI, but go ahead.
That starts with an A and an I, not an E. Close.
Yes, it's artificial intelligence.
Yes. But outside of that, we have excellence, which you kind of said when, let's make it excellent answers. Excellence, because we exude nothing but excellence here in the Ask Brien show. The other ones we have also is empathy, as in you are not very empathetic with, with me in case of, with microphones.
I'm not empathetic. Did I say you're fat?
No. But why? Come on.
I'm trying to emphasize empathetic. Another E, empathize.
Yep.
And empathize.
He was not being empathetic. Other ones we also have here is the experts, because we bring on experts onto the Ask Brien show. Outside of that, we have experience, because everybody here is experienced in some form of...
Apparently not.
Apparently not for me, yeah. Traci, help me. He's being really mean.
I just want to say that I want to be Cookie Monster.
I love it.
Because I never met a cookie I didn't like.
Well, we should invite Elmo on the show, then. That's an E.
Hey, that is an E. That's good. I love that.
Okay.
Anyway, the last ones are enthusiasm and I am excited for the greatest show on earth. Anyway, we are the greatest show on earth. We have our co-host, Traci. Traci, there?
I'm only answering the Cookie Monster today.
She goes by Cookie Monster.
Well, remember that this station is like no other station in the world. And we have our host. And we also have our guest today. And I don't want to mispronounce his name, so I'm going to go very slowly. Nishit, is that your name?
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
If I mispronounce it, please let me know. I'm not an
No
expert,
worries.
and I'm certainly not an engineer. So,
So going with the flow, it's a Nishit with the N.
Nishit with an N, okay. If you took the N out, I don't want to say what that means. But
Uh-oh.
anyway.
You don't want to split it, for sure.
Exactly, no.
Yes. There are FCC regulations around that if you change
Absolutely.
the thing.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Or even FDA.
Oh, he's very well, including with the government. Anyway, so you have this company, and the name is, what is the name of your company?
Jointechlabs.
And Jointechlab, before you started working or creating that company, what were you doing prior to that?
So I have a background in medicine. I'm an MD.
Okay.
I was seeing patients suffering a lot. And that was one of the primary reasons for conceptualizing Jointechlabs and what we do. So what Jointechlabs is basically a regenerative medicine solutions company. So which means, we're trying to use the body's own natural resources and natural cells to eliminate pain and suffering. And I've seen a lot of those in my previous years before Jointech. And that was the primary reason between me and my partner to start the company.
So is this homeopathic or naturopathic, or is it actually specific?
It's not. So it uses, your own body's stem cells. So it is a biological tissue which is used for healing and regeneration. And what we have currently is an FDA-cleared device and technology that allows you to process those stem cells in the clinic and give it back to you for a variety of clinical indications. So it's not homeopathic in nature. It's definitely using your own natural cells of the body in the clinic to be used for a variety of clinical applications.
Is it one step below cloning? I mean, using your own stem cells.
Yes, using your own stem cells, right? Absolutely.
So you were a doctor, or you still are a doctor, and were you practicing in private practice? Were you working for a group?
I was at a university in an academic setting.
Okay. And so
then,
were you teaching?
Yeah, my interest was, it was a combination of both. But my real interest lied in learning more about, novel sources of stem cells. I used to work also in a lab in the clinic, in the university. And that's how all this started. And there was a lot of interest back then in kind of exploring newer sources of stem cells. So what we started working on is a source which is abundant in everybody of us for the most part, which is your own fat, right? So we derive stem cells from your own fat in your own tummy.
Well,
I have a lot of stem cells.
I have plenty of stem cells. In fact, if anyone needs some more, I got some. It's a free offer. Anyway, so you started this company alone or with another person?
Yeah, my partner is Dr. Nathan Katz. He has a PhD in stem cell biology, so he's probably much more intelligent than me in the field. And so we actually started this company in Chicago. It's still headquartered there, but of course we spread out after that. So we met there, and he has a robust background in stem cell biology, and kind of gelled ideas on what we can do in the space. And that's how Jointechlabs was born. Seeing a common, kind of pain in regards to not being able to deliver natural therapies in the clinic was the pain point, right? You've seen a lot of synthetics and a lot of problems around, people using synthetic products. So that was the whole game on why we started Jointechlabs, to deliver natural therapies in the clinic.
Well, so you're working for a university and then you start this company. I mean, I imagine it takes a while to develop something before
Absolutely.
you can actually make funds out of it, right? So how did you work that part out? Did you had savings and stuff to use, or what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We worked on our savings. It took about, initial 3-4 years to get things going. I mean, we were sometimes working part-time and, kind of managing ends. But it was real commitment on both our sides to kind of get this through onward from the prototyping stage onto something very tangible that we can go meet the FDA with. And that took, obviously, 3-4 years at least. And from there on, we have this device now that's in the manufacturing phase, and we're already initiating sales here in the U.S. post FDA clearance. So hopefully, things are looking good from here on.
So explain a little bit about this product. You mentioned stem cells, but is it a machine that actually takes the stem cells from one person, puts them back into themselves after time, or how? Explain the way the operation.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything is autologous, which means coming from your own body, right? So there is nothing that comes from another person as such. So what we do typically is that, the patient would walk in, they would do a small mini liposuction procedure it's all under local anesthesia, right? In the clinic, right? So no operating or procedure room needed. They would take about, anywhere between 60 to 120 ml of fat from your tummy using a small needle and a syringe. And then that would get processed right away within the next half an hour in the clinic with this device. And then the end product is ready to be injected back to wherever the pain point is, including, the areas of applications are, of course, a lot of joint problems. So, orthopedic conditions where people have, either osteoarthritis or, ligament tears and so on, as well as a lot of facial aesthetic applications where you're using biologicals, which means tissue coming out from your own body rather than using a lot of synthetic materials like fillers and Botox and stuff.
And you're doing that at the same time? So in other words, they're still on the local, they're taking it out and then putting it back in? Or is that done an hour or two later or a couple days later?
Yeah, so the whole process takes about an hour. So as I said, once the patient walks in, it's about a 20-minute mini lipo procedure. They take a small amount of fat. It gets processed within the next half hour, and then the injection is right away. So there is no anesthesia needed or a procedure room needed for the injection back. So all in all, it takes about an hour or 15 minutes, and the patient walks in and walks out.
And this is a unique product to yourself, or are there, because I know it's FDA approved, but are there other companies with similar products out there?
Yeah, so there is, the field has been evolving over the last decade for sure. I mean, there are not too many robust players in the field yet, but of course there is different kinds of biological products. So, some people do process some stem cells or, it's called PRP or platelet-rich plasma from the blood, and so on. So there is, competition in the space with different biologics, right? So you're still using your own, body's cells or tissues, but maybe not necessarily using fat as a source. You could be using blood as a source or something else as a source.
Now, so you are 100% FDA approved. You said that process took a couple of years. So my understanding, and I have very little background in this area, but you do have to go through 3 or 4 series of clinical trials where you're actually doing this on people, and then afterwards, if it's working or effective, after 3 or 4 clinical tests, and the group expands, then at some point that it gets approved. Is that the way the process works, or you want to be more clear on that?
Yeah, so the way what you're describing is for drugs, basically in the sense you're doing a chemical for the market. The way it works with devices is, a little bit different, where, you have to prove of course it takes a lot of paperwork and data in regards to the safety of the device, the manufacturing capability, and, how the device is built. And also a lot of clinical validations, as you rightly described. It's not, leaching product, it's safe to inject back and so on. But generally, it's a little bit less stringent pathway than a proper chemical-based drug pathway, which would be, a lot of phase trials and so on. So it's a little bit of a shorter pathway for medical devices.
And you mentioned that it works for pain, like the joints or whatever. What other parts of the body have you applied it for?
Yeah, so right now the focus is on basically 2 broader areas. One is pain mitigation for orthopedic conditions as well as for wound healing, which means, some chronic wounds like diabetic wounds and so on, where you can do local applications. So everything is locally based, right? So you're not injecting it IV or anything. You're doing it very localized, either in the joint or around the wounds. And then also, as I mentioned, for a lot of medical aesthetic and plastic surgery related applications where they use fat as fillers instead of doing synthetic fillers. So you can use fat or stem cells as rejuvenation biological tissue instead of using synthetic fillers.
And how many locations can you get this in? Is it 1, 2, 10, 50? What?
You mean like physical locations, right?
Yes.
In the U.S. Yeah. So right now we're just still panning out the commercialization post FDA clearance. Right now we have about 10 different medical centers using this all across the country, right? From New England to the tri-state to California to some parts of Florida as well.
So one thing that I'm seeing here is an educational part you're going to have to do, right? It seems to me that there's probably a lot of people, myself included, that never heard of this, don't understand what it's all about. I mean, we've heard of stem cells. And so it seems to me there's going to be a lot of that educational part to get people up to speed to explain before they can actually go out and say, to create that demand. You can't just, it's not like, hey, I've got, an ulcer and, I'm advertising on TV. You gotta really educate people about what it is. That's what I see. Is that you?
Absolutely.
And so what things are you doing educationally? So if you can quickly go off, if you have
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, our focus has not been so much on kind of customer level, like, consumer level, education. It was more education for the doctors as well, right? Because even for them, the field is still new. So that's why we're doing a lot of webinars. We're, kind of presenting at a lot of conferences, our data, as well as a lot of different publications, going, talking to these doctors, explaining how this works and why it is beneficial for their patient. So right now it's more so a B2B approach that we're taking. But of course, at the same time, we're kind of, in the process of building a newer website for the end consumer, which is the patient. So, new landing pages explaining how this would benefit them instead of using synthetic products, like, say, for joint conditions. It could be that they're using steroid shots or doing some kind of visco supplement, which means like a gel, which overall in the long term, including the steroid shots, kind of destroy the joint much further than what it is currently. So that's kind of part of the education process that we are undertaking.
Anyway, Traci, you had a couple questions you wanted to ask Nishit, and I'm going to have a couple questions as well. Why don't you start? Because I had a couple questions first. You go, and then I'll ask some more when you're done.
That sounds great. So one of the things that I'd really love for you to share with our audience is the inspiration behind launching this product itself. Like, what was that catalyst for you that saw the need in the marketplace and then you decided to take that lead?
Absolutely. As we all know, nobody's getting younger, right? So the world population, 65 and above, is going to be about 1.5 billion in the next decade or so. We're increasing life expectancy, right? So I'm guessing 8 out of 10 are going to have some sort of degenerative problems. And what do you do today, right? Like, if you have some sort of a problem with aging, you either use drugs or some quick fixes, right? Like, you go out to the doctor, they give you a shot of, say, a steroid, and so on. So there's no real emphasis on building a natural defense system for the body. And, we've seen it all, we have all seen, like, probably our moms, dads, everybody's suffering from some sort of joint problems, some sort of ulcers that never heal, or even, side effects of using all these different synthetics, be it for the aesthetic work or for joint problems and so on. So that was really, hitting hard. And at that same time, we had this whole focus on stem cells being, huge natural healing potential. Where, a small amount of your body tissue can give you millions and millions of your own stem cells for therapeutic use. So that was the real inspiration on how do we bring this to the clinic, right? Like, there was knowledge out there, a lot of scientific emphasis on how we can, kind of create those stem cells and give it back, but no real solutions how we bring it to the clinic. So that was when we kind of got together with Nathan and, kind of started working on a prototype for a device that could be worked in a clinic, which can deliver these, stem cells back to you in a very non-invasive way and in a very intuitive way, less time consuming and, of course, affordable for the general public.
That's so amazing. And I'm assuming that you did a tremendous amount of research prior to making such a huge investment of resources and time. What were some of the things that you did to proof out your concept?
Absolutely. So we actually started with building laboratory protocols. We even didn't start with the device, right? But that was kind of an afterthought on how do we pan it out to every clinic. So we started, of course, with a lot of R&D in regards to lab protocols on how we can effectively, isolate these cells and, what could be the best ratio and so on and so forth. So beyond that, then there was this thought on how can we pan it out, maybe a lab like this, probably, the bigger university systems might be able to afford, but not the local clinic, right? And that's the reason why it's not panning out as a standard of care, right? Like as of now. So that was the whole purpose, and that's why when we started prototyping the device, it took about, a good 3-4 years to really, because we had to shrink kind of the whole lab process into this small device, which could be very portable and usable in the clinic, right? So it took about good 4 years to, build over, 4 to 5 different iterations and prototyping to come to a final product, right? And we are still in the phase where, sometimes we have to update certain things based on the feedback. So it's a continuum as such. But yeah, that was kind of the inspiration on why we thought this could be very useful to pan out regenerative medicine and use of natural cells in the clinic.
One of the things that we talk a lot about on our show is the relationships that are created as part of launching an endeavor, the magnitude of yours especially. And you mentioned earlier that you had a partner Tell us a little bit about how the two of you came together to be partners, and tell us a little bit about how you separated your roles in terms of being partners, and maybe a tip for those out there who are thinking about bringing in a partner.
Absolutely. So, we were a part of a small biotech community in Chicago, and that's how we met. He had a strong interest in stem cells, being a PhD in the background, and, I had a strong interest in kind of the clinical applications of it. So we kind of gelled right away. We knew it was a common interest, and from there on, we decided to work on this, and then eventually, formed Jointechlabs to kind of build the products out of it. So that's how we met, and it was a common interest that took us forward into building Jointechlabs. And of course, it was very clear right from the start. He has his huge focus and domain expertise in kind of a lot of the technical and scientific stuff related to stem cells. And I was more in the realm of, how do you create these clinical applications? How do you go through the regulatory path? And so it was a very clear divide right from the start, and we've kind of maintained it even now. So, he kind of takes care of a lot of the scientific technical stuff within the company, and I take care of a lot of, I've adopted to, kind of doing a lot of business operations for the company as well. But technically, I still deal with a lot of the clinical application part.
And how about investors? Have you brought in investors, or do you have plans to bring in investors?
Yeah, we did a good-sized seed round of $1.25 million so far over the last, 6-7 years to kind of build the company, build the prototype, go through the clearance, and develop a lot of, kind of the clinical programs that we have. We are, raising another round, and we're kind of halfway through it as well for kind of the actual sales and marketing aspect of putting the device across the U.S. So, yes, we are raising right now, and yeah, I'd be happy to give you more information to your listeners.
Oh, yeah, we always love to hear the journey around raising funds, because it's such a mysterious and can have a lot of mystique around it, and sometimes can even feel like a shell game. So if you could offer any insights on your experience, that'd be great.
But as an attorney who's dealt with securities law, just be careful about what you say, because it is on the radio and it is a public forum. This is not a joke. You've got to be careful what you say, because it's not a solicitation for offer of fund, and you're not speaking to anyone or sophisticated investors or anyone, so you have to be careful.
Yeah, I understand. Right. Yeah, thank you for the heads up. So, yeah, I mean, we have been lucky to kind of get, like-minded investors who understand the space. It's a long cycle, right? Like going through for a medtech, biotech, it's a longer cycle than doing, some apps on the phone. Definitely you need much more patience in regards to going through a lot of regulatory hurdles and, of course, manufacturing and so on and so forth. So, no, we've been lucky in that space. And, that's another thing I would kind of tell to your listeners, that do find investors who, not just for the money, but also some strategic inputs, right? Because that really helps when you have, say like right now we're part of the Expert Dojo program, and, they're really, really helpful in regards to how you grow the company, how you establish marketing and sales and so on. So, Brien has been really helpful along that. At times, you being a startup, you don't have all the, apparatus to kind of take on everything. You might have domain expertise in a few things that you need for the company, but you still need help or consultants to kind of help you through the other aspects. And that's where, if you have strategic investors, there's a lot of good introductions they can make. So that's really helpful as well.
Have you ever had investors that said, hey, listen, I really like the product, but if it could do X or Y or Z, I definitely would be willing to invest? And has anyone ever said that to you? And if they did, how would you respond to that? Would you change your product for the right investor?
So all the time there is always some, not negative, but critical feedback in regards to what you need more. So that's always a given. But then, from there on, you do build a relationship and, kind of explain what you think can happen with the company or what you think needs to happen to take us from point A to point B. And often they do understand. I've rarely come across anybody who has asked us to change the complete profile of the product or the company. They typically understand you have your sweat equity in this product. Only if they realize, and if you realize it's not a product to market fit, is when you really have to pivot completely onto a different side. But generally it's more focused on, building traction. Like, if I see this, I would definitely like to keep the conversation going. And if you reach this point, I would definitely like to invest in you. So it's kind of that kind of a response typically.
So talking through the marketing aspect from B2B to B2C, And it sounded like, too, from your initial part of the conversation that you launched the business with a B2B focus and that you're bringing in a B2C focus. Is that to have brand awareness, like when you see commercials and things like that, to ask your doctor about? Or like, can you help us with the marketing strategy around the focus pivot and then some of the marketing elements that you're putting into place to target each of those B2B and B2C categories?
Absolutely. I think, that's again a domain expertise that, was brought on by Expert Dojo. Like we were always kind of focused on the B2B approach because we thought it's a technical product. The doctors might just be the right audience for us. But again, it was a perspective brought on that, it definitely helps when a consumer listens to something like this and asks the doctor about it on, why can't I get this kind of a therapy and or a product to be used on me where I'm suffering, in the joints or something else, right? So that was a focus that we kind of just initiating and just learning about it on how to approach a B2C market. And we haven't really developed any collateral or creatives around it yet, but that will be the focus in this year to kind of develop the creatives around a B2C approach as well. So, but generally otherwise for the B2B, of course with COVID things were different. Everything was kind of online based, but right now, things are opening up, so we would we're starting off with our trade shows, conferences, of course, a lot of branding around the product, offline brochures, digital presence as well, and creating these automated sales funnels and so on. So that's kind of been the general approach.
And what about accessibility? Is the product, so if you were to do a campaign around consumer awareness and the consumer latched onto that and then want to ask their primary care physician about it, is it accessible worldwide? Is it, is there an accessibility challenge? How does that work?
Yeah, there is some, not challenge, I would say. It's some sort of awareness that we have to definitely generate in regards to the consumer on why it would be beneficial for them, because, there is a market enough for all the synthetics. Obviously with a lot of funding goes into all these bigger pharmas that, create awareness around their products. So there is an awareness component that needs to be in place before it can really pan out worldwide. And doctors, and consumers start asking their doctors they do have a general sense, but there is no real awareness as of on a global scale yet.
So internationally, are you taking any steps internationally? Because usually the market is so big in the U.S. and, you still have to get over so many hurdles here in the U.S. Are you exploring any international things now, or is that like way, way, way down the?
Yeah, no, we are actually exploring the international market. We have, already, kind of the paperwork in place for, getting approved in EU, which would take about probably 12 months from now. And also a few other countries, so we're kind of, working on the regulatory side to get this device approved in ex-US as well. But you're right, we have to kind of be, very conscious in the effort because marketing and sales is a ball game in itself. So, we kind of keeping it limited to the US right now, but also, having interest in the global market because definitely there is a huge market outside US as well. So first steps is to get regulatory approvals there and then kind of think about the marketing plan there. But definitely right now the idea is to pan it out across US first.
And how long do you think it'll be before you'll actually have the product at a facility where somebody can go in and get it?
So as I said, we already have, we are typically right now we're working through distributors of medical devices. So they have a good size account, right? So typically that's how we're working. We haven't really initiated any direct approaches to doctors yet, apart from, of course, the key opinion leaders that we work with in the field. But generally, we're kind of working with distributors who have their own accounts. So definitely in these states that I mentioned, we already have, active doctors using the product. So we can definitely, if there is interest, we can kind of direct the patients there.
Well, go ahead, Trace.
Yeah, so we were talking on the break about where you see the company going and what are your growth areas, like what's next for your company?
Absolutely. So, yeah, definitely we want to become an ecosystem of regulated, regenerative medicine devices and therapies, of course, at the point of care. Establishing a standard of care, right? That's the whole point, right? Like it could well be very as ubiquitous as having a blood pressure done at a local clinic, So that's the vision, right? Probably 2, 3, 4 years from now, it should be a global ecosystem where this should be a given, right? Like you can go demand with a doctor to get your own tissues and cells for any kind of therapies that you want. So instead of, problems with either using synthetics or because of aging, because of our devices, doctors will be able to offer these non-surgical kind of regenerative medicine therapies at the local clinic to mitigate pain and suffering. That's the goal.
What's going to stop competition?
Yeah, great question.
What's going to stop competition?
Yeah, we have a leader advantage as of now, because of the kind of products, which are platform kind of products. So not just these devices, we are kind of developing therapies around it as part of our clinical programs, which I didn't even kind of get into for this call. But, we have some sort of an emerging leader advantage, and, there's not really too many big pharma or medtech yet in this space, and it's still evolving. So definitely, if we do things right, of course, there will be competition, and probably there is already competition, but we do have a leader advantage, being a better product. In regards to pricing as well, we are very competitive. So I believe we can definitely take it from there.
Exit strategy.
As I said, most of the big pharma medtech are yet on the sidelines. They're still looking for the next emerging unicorn in the space. So if we do things right, we already have the device cleared in the U.S. If we get a few countries ex-U.S. and also kind of developed on the clinical programs that we have, I think we'll be very, very good candidate for a merger acquisition by one of those, either the Medtronics or Strykers or even some in maybe the J&J kind of companies.
If someone wanted to get in touch with you, wanted to learn more about the product, what is the best way for them to find out more about the company and about the product itself?
Absolutely. So, yeah, our website is pretty good. They have, most of the information for doctors, as well as we have a separate section on for the consumers to really understand, what this device or technology can do for you. So, www.jointechlabs.com, jointechlabs.com is the perfect place to go. We have our email listed there. We have a phone number that you can call or just have a form filled out for us to reach you back. So those are all the ways you kind of ask your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them.
And if you were going to provide one, just like a lesson that you've learned throughout your journey of launching this business, what is the one piece of advice that you would give? Besides
Ask Brien, go ahead.
Of course, yeah, I should have started there, right? Ask Brien. But so definitely. But definitely, in this space, especially the whole medtech, biotech field, one suggestion or one advice is to have patience. Just don't get frustrated. There will be a lot of ups and downs in the business as you go along all these different, R&D, manufacturing, regulatory, IP, all the different kind of stuff.
Well, thank you very much for listening to KHS 1220, 98.1 FM. Thank you very much. Have a great week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Brien radio show. You can listen to us every Thursday on KTHS AM 1220 and FM 98.1 or via Facebook Live or anytime wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit AskBrien.com to join the conversation and ask us your business questions, and we'll answer them on our next episode. That's AskBrien.com.